Thanks, Drew. If I don't move these stools, I'll be tripping over. Well, I have to start off with great job, Bob McCon, opening up today. That was absolutely wonderful with the slides, a lot of memories. I truly appreciate that. And to follow the three that I followed, it's remarkable what I've learned from you and what I now understand a little bit more clearly, and absolutely remarkable, both Walt and John. Thank you very much for that. Diane says to me over the last week, my wife, she says, where's your notes? Where's your, do you have anything to follow through? And as I just told Geraldine back there in the crowd, I'm kind of like a mentor of Bob Full. He says if they call you up, just razzle them with bullshit and they'll love you forever. And I'm not going to razzle you with bullshit. You might learn something from me about my history and where I came from. I am honored to be up here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in this group and the inaugural group in Jesse and E-Services. Walt made a good point about Mark Twain and not to steal anything from Walt, but you don't know in life what you're going to do. My humble beginnings were pretty tragic, for the fact is that I was in second grade at St. Alphonsus Catholic School in Springdale, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And I was coming home from school one day, and as I came down Oak Street and across Grant Street with my neighbor buddies that we all graduated together with, I saw an ambulance down the street. And that ambulance was Edward Kuznicki Funeral Home. And it was a low-top Cadillac ambulance, not the high-top, as you saw in the pictures from Bob McCon with Monroeville 4. But Ed Kuznicki had two ambulances. He had a low-top, and he had a high-top. And the low-top was in front of my house. And I said, holy mackerel. And I do remember this. And I could tell you that I don't remember what I ate yesterday. Well, I do know what I ate yesterday. But 2 days ago, I couldn't tell you maybe what I did. So long story short, I'm walking with Steve and my buddy, and we're walking down, and I see my grandfather and Ed Kuznicki carrying my mother out of the house on a stretcher. Long story short, when I went to school that day, it was a Monday. It was February. I had to look this up. It was February 26th. It was a Monday in 1968. And my mom was on the couch with my Grandma Babinchak, her mom, with a towel on her forehead, and she was sick Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Our local doctor, Dr. Ard in town, when we had, you could walk to the doctor's office, ring the bell, go in, see Dr. Ard. He'd clean your ears out smoking a Pall Mall. His office ceiling was brown. That was, a long time ago. Walt's giving me a thumbs up because I can't see much of anybody here. But long story short, my mom was taken to Citizens General Hospital, and Ed Kuznicki drove the ambulance and Grandpap rode with her. Well, that's the way the funeral homes did it back then. So that was on Monday. Thursday evening, about 9:30 in the evening, I was at home. My Grandma Babinchak was home, my Grandpa Babinchak. My dad, my Aunt Sue, Uncle Dave, and my Aunt Pat came in the house, and we all went to the dining room, and my mom passed away that day. She was 28 years old, and she was 7 months pregnant. And she died of leukemia, and she was sick for all that time, and it was never diagnosed that she had leukemia at age 28. So what I'm saying about that is I lost my mom at 28. I was in second grade. My next sister was in first grade. I had a brother at home and two other sisters at home, and the one sister was just about 18 months old. So my dad had a dilemma with us 5 kids and himself, and I was very grateful that we stayed together as a family after my mom's passing, where my grandma and Grandpa Babinchak moved into our house, sold their house in Springdale, raised us through the Catholic Church, all went to high school, all got married, all got educated, and absolutely blessed with a loving family and directions in our lives. Well, this is where my direction in my life went. So Mom died in 1968. In 1969, my dad pulls me out of Catholic school. I don't want anybody, my two sons went to Central Catholic, so my dad pulled me out of St. Alphonsus to public school because it was $100 a month. Wow. Think about that. My boys went to Central Catholic. It was $6,700 a month, and I had two of them there, 2 years apart, but they were together for 2 years. So long story short with that, I became 15 years old, and I went to the local firehouse and saw my buddy Henry Mink, who was the fire chief at the time. He was chief for like 45 years. I says, Henry, I want to be a junior fireman. He says, my dad was Big Norm, I was Little Norm. And my dad, Henry says to me, he says, Little Norm, we don't have a junior program. So another good friend of mine, Dave Gillard, was the chief at Cheswick. And I went down to Cheswick Fire Department on my bicycle, down the hill past Duquesne Light, which isn't there anymore. It's an obsolete power plant, coal-fired, over the last year or so. And I became a junior fireman. A week after becoming a junior fireman, Kuznicki Funeral Home got out of the ambulance business. This is 1976. And Cheswick Fire Department and Harmer Township Fire Department each got one of the two ambulances. Pretty amazing. I said, wow, that's the ambulance that took my mom to the hospital. And here I am, I'm a junior fireman. They gave me high boots, long coat, a helmet. And back then, the fire service was fundamentals of firefighting. Well, to ride on the ambulance, Bob showed the certificate. It was that ancient document. It was like an advanced first aid. I took it one step further. I found out that there was an EMT class at Kiski High School, and it was taught by Mary and Bob Kepix. And had a wonderful experience, went to EMT program there, and was able to get myself not on the volunteer fire side, but on the ambulance side. While all this is going on, a gentleman named Charlie Manning was starting Lower Valley Ambulance Service. The fire departments held the ambulances until the current Lower Valley Ambulance Service building, which you know today on Acme Avenue, was completed, which was an old alternator shop with pits in the bay floors and grease everywhere. And it was converted to Lower Valley, as it is today. And I remember every ambulance said, volunteers who care. Well, where do you go today in EMS, especially in Western Pennsylvania, and see a volunteer ambulance service? It's very, very rare. It's all career folks. So as an EMT, I was sitting at home, and Cheswick had the ambulance, Harmer had the ambulance, Lower Valley's just getting ready to pull the cord on opening up. And my dad was sitting at home, and the doorbell rang. And one of his best friends, who I knew for a long time, Rudy Trebeck, the father of one of our great guys who passed not 6 months ago, Don Trebeck from Rescue One, came in and said, Little Norm, what do you want to do in your life? I says, well, I'm not sure. Well, my goal was to follow my Uncle Elton from West Virginia, who got a civil engineering degree, and he worked for West Virginia Department of Transportation. And he was a surveyor, and he was the lead surveyor from the Pennsylvania line to Morgantown, West Virginia on Interstate 79. And he'd tell me stories about moving coal and grading and all these pictures and everything like that. So I wanted to go to WVU and get my engineering degree. Well, there was no money for that. I didn't have a scholarship, things like that. So long term, I said to Rudy, I says, I don't know. And he says, listen, my son just got hired at Pittsburgh EMS. Pittsburgh Emergency Medical Services. What do you call it, Walt? The super ambulances. And I said, that's pretty cool. Well, time moves on, Lower Valley starts. I'm at Lower Valley as an EMT, and with all the volunteers who care, very much mentors, Charlie Manning, Dave Gillard from Cheswick Fire Department, Mike Lyko from Harmer Fire Department. By the way, Harmer Fire Department and Cheswick Fire Department no longer exist. Harmer merged as an Allegheny Valley Volunteer Fire Company, Station 315, and Cheswick now merged with them over the last year and a half. So both of those departments are non-existent in Allegheny County. So go into a call, go to Columbia Hospital, and I want to tell you one thing about going on my first ambulance call. It was in the ambulance that took my mom to Citizens General Hospital in 1968. That was pretty remarkable. I just still think about it today. The ambulance that took her took me on my first run at Lower Valley Ambulance Service. Soon after that, we got vans. The Cadillacs went away. But I had a great relationship with Charlie Manning, and the day that we got 2 vans, I was able to drive the Superior High Top up to Fund Superior Cells in Lower Burrell to trade the 2 vans in for 2 Cadillacs for 2 ambulances. Well, in my garage on my shelf, I have the Federal 12 Beacon off of the original ambulance from Kiznicki Funeral Home. From my first ambulance call and my mom's ambulance ride, and I'm very proud of that I got off of Mr. Fund, Terry Sr., who's now passed us. So, going to Columbia Hospital, who do I meet? Alan Shatner, Dave Frank from Penn Hills EMS. Talk about paramedic program, EMT2 at the time. Well, I became a graduate of Dr. Shatner's paramedic program that started in February and ended in May, late May. Myself and Jeff Watt, who was a city paramedic, who's now works for the Bureau of Police, we went together 5 days a week and every Thursday evening. But that has a story in itself. I was still in high school. Charlie Manning found out about Dr. Shatner's program that started in February. I didn't graduate until June 11th of that year. So I would have had to be in high school and go to a paramedic program. So Charlie went to the school board. And since I had all my, I don't know what you call credits or credentials to graduate, the school district allowed me to take work program time to go to the paramedic program and go to high school at the same time. So for 6 weeks, I went to Columbia Hospital in Wilkinsburg with Jeff Watt, and all the school needed was an attendance record from Dr. Shatner every Friday. And back then we had we had fax machines, but I had to hand deliver it. And in turn, I graduated the paramedic program the day I graduated high school. I was 18 years old, had a driver's license, I was a paramedic, and boom, where do you think I went? I applied for Pittsburgh EMS. And why did I apply for Pittsburgh EMS? Because I left out the part that after I became an EMT at Kiski High School, who was at Cheswick Fire Department teaching EMT class other than Glenn Cannon and John Leahy from the city of Pittsburgh? It was pretty amazing. I didn't have to do it. I was putting Pepsi out, chips out on a table, things like that. So I met Glenn. And then when I applied for Pittsburgh EMS, I go down, get an interview. The interview was great, but I had to lose 31 pounds to get the job. That's when Pittsburgh had the metropolitan height and weight scale. Those 31 pounds are back, by the way. They really are. But the thing is, I walk in for the interview, and I heard it this morning. Boom, Norman. I says, Director Cannon. I says, I remember you from Cheswick Fire Department. It was quick, da-da-da, a couple evenings, whatever. He says, so you want to be a Pittsburgh paramedic? I says, yes. He stood up from his chair, reached across his desk, shook my hand, and says, congratulations. That was it. I came out, and Chuck Brantner was sitting there by the water cooler. And God bless him. And he got hired with me. And he goes, what happened? He goes, you were only in there in a minute. I said, I don't know. He says, you want to be a Pittsburgh paramedic? He says, I says, yes. He says, congratulations, you're on. And I left, and Chuck went in, and Chuck got hired too. So that's kind of how all that worked. And that in time in September of 1979, I was an EMT2 paramedic, had all the requirements to be a city employee. And that's the day I met Bob Full And that's the day I met John Moon, Bob McCaughan, Jim Sutton. It's been remarkable. Ron Romano, my neighbor for 35 years in Stanton Heights, and just a remarkable experience for 33, and I'm going to say that 33 years, 8 months, and 3 days. That's what the Municipal Pension Board told me that I invested in Pittsburgh EMS. And with that said, I got a call one day. I'm home in my kitchen. I'm making a grilled cheese sandwich at lunchtime. The phone rings, and it was a strange number, but I answered it. It was the house phone, and it was Bob Full. He says, "Hey, you ready for a career change?" I says, "Oh, not really." I said, "I'm really, doing." He says, "Why don't you come to Pima with Director Cannon and myself?" He says, "There's some things you have to go through on a state level." And that's what happened. I left Pittsburgh EMS to go to Pima, and I spent 3.5 years there till a new governor came in and told the 8 of us that we were no longer needed in the new administration. And I don't know how this happened, and I know Matt Brown, Chief Brown is in the crowd, but the day at Pima, I was told by then the new Pima director that my services were no longer needed and I needed to see HR. It devastated me, but I understood. I told Diane on the phone. That evening, I'm sitting in my apartment in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and the phone rang. It was Alvin Henderson from Allegheny County. He says, "I understand that you might not be staying at Pima." And I said, "How in the hell do you know that?" He says, "Listen," he says, "we're going to have a position here for Division Chief of Emergency Medical Services. Are you interested? You'll have to go through the process." And that's what I did. I came back, went through the process, transition, really appreciated the opportunity. My colleagues back in Western Pennsylvania, EMS chiefs, the whole 9 yards. And then that changed after about 2 years when Pittsburgh Fire was hiring an assistant chief because Chief Cook was going to the state. I came from the state. He went back to the state. And I went through the process there, and I carried my career back with the city of Pittsburgh for 5 years and 5 months in the Bureau of Fire as the Assistant Chief of Operations, which I truly loved. And I retired with a firefighter pension on April 30th of 2022. But none of that would be all successful if I wouldn't say, for the simple fact, how Lower Valley, Kiznicki Funeral Home, and everything impacted my life to get me where I am today. In 1977, the love of my life came into my life. She was a medical student at Forbes Trail, Monroeville, and she was doing a senior citizens event in Oakmont with Lower Valley Ambulance and a crew over there. And they talked to Diane to come over to Lower Valley to see the ambulances and see the station. And they brought her over after the event. And when Walt Ramsey opened the side door of that van ambulance, and she got out in her little white uniform, nurse's hat, and the whole 9 yards, that was it. And Charlie Manning's leaning there looking out those glass windows in the front of the building. They're glass blocked now. And says, "Wow, look at that." I said, "Oh, I know." He reached in his pocket, and he gave me his car keys. He says, "You get her home." I took her home that day, May of 1977. And this July, we'll be married 42 years. From 11th grade in high school. And on top of that, we've been together a little over 45 years. And I still see people today in the community say, "You still with Diane?" I said, "Absolutely." But the day she got it, so if you don't think ambulances, EMS, or anything impacted my life, it really did, because it brought me 2 things. It brought me a valiant career, great people, great camaraderie, a wonderful woman, and 2 great sons. 48 seconds. Boy, he's got his watch on. Nathan in Suffolk, Virginia, with his wife, Daly, who they are moving from Suffolk to Bethesda, Maryland, because Daly is a board-certified pediatrician with the U.S. Air Force, and she just got the only spot in 2024 for a 3-year fellowship at Walter Reed Hospital, and it's outstanding that she got that. And They're going to be 3 hours closer to us now, so it's going to be easy to go to Bethesda versus all the way to Suffolk. And my youngest son, Ryan, Sergeant of Murraysville Police Department, with a wonderful daughter-in-law. We love her to death, Kinsey, and our only grandson, Riker, who turns 5 years old on April 30th. And tomorrow morning, we have the pleasure to pick him up and have him for the weekend. And that's what it's all about. It's all about family. And I want to leave you with one thing. EMS impacts us all, and you don't know who you're going to contact. But I went on a call with Unit 502 one day to Plummer Street in Lawrenceville. Because if I was out and about and there was an ambulance, I was closer to the ambulance, I went to the call. That's just the way it is. I've heard it this morning. Take care of the people. I went to a call on Plummer Street. 89-year-old woman, I knock on the door and go in. As I'm examining her, she's complaining of nausea and headache. I got a medic unit coming. I looked through her first floor of her house and up the steps. Pictures everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I said, honey, you have one hell of a family. She says, honey, I have no one. Those are the pictures that came with the frames. And it just devastated me. I rode with her to St. Francis Hospital. The medic unit, one of the crew members followed in a Suburban. And I just needed to give her something. And I gave her something, hold my hand on the way to the hospital, though we did nothing for her, vital signs and care and comfort. But there's a lot of people out there that don't have what we have. And we really need to appreciate the fact that we've got loving friends, loving family, loving colleagues that really get the job done. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that opened up some things, and thank you so much again. And I did go over. 41 seconds.